Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 1991, a city of industry and hardworking families built on the shores of Lake Michigan. In the heart of its blue-collar neighborhoods, life moved at a rhythm both familiar and comforting. For the Millers, Robert and Susan, and their two daughters, Sarah and Emily, their modest home on 27th Street was a sanctuary, a vibrant hub filled with mundane joys and occasional teenage dramas. The air often carried the scent of freshly cut grass in spring, snow in winter, and always, faintly, the malty tang of brewing beer. Sarah, 17, was the elder, a whirlwind of youthful energy. Her hazel eyes sparkled with fierce independence. She dreamed beyond Milwaukee, poring over college brochures. Her bedroom wall was a tapestry of band posters, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, REM, alongside magazine cutouts of faraway universities and emerging fashion trends. A senior at Washington High School, she expertly juggled a part-time job at the Daily Grind diner on Capitol Drive, her studies, and a blossoming social life. She had a steady boyfriend, Mark, and her weekends were a blur of cruising down her avenue with friends, windows down, car stereo blasting alternative rock. She embodied the restless spirit of early 90s youth, eager to embrace the world. Emily, 2 years Sarah's junior, was a quieter, more introspective soul. 15, still navigating the awkward passages of early high school, she possessed an extraordinary talent for drawing, filling countless spiral-bound notebooks with intricate sketches of fantastical creatures and serene landscapes. A freshman, a bit shy and preferring the quiet company of books and her art supplies, she found solace in her creative pursuits. Her best friend, Jessica, lived just a few blocks away, and their afternoons were typically spent hunched over sketchpads or talking for hours on the corded, beige rotary phone in Emily's room. They'd discuss school, crushes, and the latest teen magazines. Their parents, Robert and Susan, were exemplars of the Milwaukee working class. Robert, a foreman at a bustling manufacturing plant, put in long, grueling hours, his hands calloused from years of physical labor, his humor dry but endearing. Susan, a dedicated registered nurse at St. Joseph's Hospital, often worked demanding night shifts, a testament to her dedication and the family's need for dual incomes. They weren't wealthy, but their home was rich in love, shared values, and the unwavering belief in hard work, instilling in their daughters a strong sense of responsibility and community. Their evenings were a comforting tableau. Dinner around a Formica kitchen table, the lingering scent of Susan's hearty cooking, the low hum of the television, punctuated by the girls' laughter or occasional squabbles over the phone. These were the rhythms of a typical American family in the early 90s, before the digital age irrevocably altered daily life. The spring of 1991 was unfolding with its usual promise, the bite of Midwestern winter slowly giving way to warmer days. On April 23rd, a Tuesday, the air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and budding leaves. It began as an ordinary school day, unremarkable in every way. Sarah had an early shift at the diner, leaving around 6:30 a.m. Her last words to her sister were a casual, "Don't forget to lock the door, Em, see you later." Emily, still groggy, mumbled a reply from beneath her duvet. A perfectly normal, forgettable morning exchange until it became anything but. Later that afternoon, after school, Emily walked the familiar route to Jessica's house. They spent a couple of hours immersed in a history project, then headed to the local convenience store for sodas and candy. Around 5:30 p.m., Emily left Jessica's, promising to call later. She was due home by 6 p.m., a non-negotiable rule in the Miller household. When Robert got home from work at 6:30 p.m., the house was quiet, too quiet. He called out for the girls, his voice echoing in the empty rooms. No response. He checked their bedrooms, beds unmade, but no sign of them. This wasn't entirely unusual for Emily. She might be at Jessica's longer than planned, or Sarah might have picked her up. He fixed himself a plate of leftovers and watched the evening news, the mundane routine providing a false sense of security. But as 7 p.m. turned to 7:30 p.m., then 8 p.m., a knot of unease began to tighten in his stomach. Sarah should have been home. He tried her pager number, a new device she'd gotten for work, but received no reply. He called the Daily Grind diner, and the manager confirmed Sarah had clocked out at 7 p.m. sharp. He called Jessica's house, and Jessica's mom confirmed Emily had left hours ago. The pit in his stomach deepened, cold and heavy. When Susan called from the hospital during her break at 8:45 p.m., Robert tried to sound calm, but his voice betrayed him, strained and hoarse. "The girls aren't home yet," he admitted. Susan, with her nurse's intuition, instantly perceived the gravity. "Have you called anyone else?" she asked, her own heart beginning to pound. She knew her daughters. This was not like them. Robert had. Friends, classmates, neighbors. No one had seen them since Emily left Jessica's. Sarah's boyfriend, Mark, hadn't heard from her since that morning. He said Sarah had mentioned a casual plan to meet up with some friends from the diner after her shift, but she hadn't specified who or where. The details were vague. By 10 p.m., Susan was on her way home, her shift abandoned, her mind racing. The house felt colder, larger, infused with an oppressive silence. They called the Milwaukee Police Department. The dispatcher, accustomed to calls about runaways, advised them to wait. "Most kids turn up within 24 hours, she said, her tone professional but dismissive. Robert, a man who rarely raised his voice, found himself shouting into the phone, his frustration boiling over. "These aren't most kids, this isn't like them, something is wrong." The Millers spent a long, sleepless night, pacing their living room, their eyes glued to the front door, to the silent telephone, to each other. Every creak of the old house, every car passing down the street, sent a jolt of false hope, then renewed despair. Dawn broke, painting the Milwaukee sky in hues of pale gray and anxious orange. The girls were still gone. The next day, the Milwaukee Police Department officially opened a missing persons case. Detectives John Keller and Maria Rodriguez were assigned. Keller, a seasoned veteran with a thick mustache and weary eyes, had seen too much. Rodriguez, younger, sharp, and meticulous, was eager to prove herself. Their first steps were standard: extensive interviews with the Millers, Jessica and her family, Mark, Sarah's coworkers at the daily grind, and their classmates. The girls' friends were questioned, their lockers searched, their school records reviewed. Everyone described Sarah as responsible, a bit of a free spirit, but not reckless. Emily was consistently portrayed as quiet, studious, utterly unlikely to vanish without a word. No one could recall any recent arguments, no signs of distress, no talk of running away. The leads were scarce, frustratingly almost non-existent. No strange vehicles reported in the neighborhood. No eyewitnesses to anything out of the ordinary around the time Emily left Jessica's house or Sarah left the diner. Sarah's blue 1987 Chevy Cavalier was still parked in the Miller driveway, which immediately ruled out them driving off voluntarily. This meant they had left on foot or with someone else. The detectives canvassed the neighborhood relentlessly, knocking on every door, showing blurry school photos of Sarah and Emily. Most neighbors remembered seeing the girls regularly, but none had seen them on that specific Tuesday afternoon or evening. The local news picked up the story, first as a small blurb, then growing into a more prominent feature as days stretched into weeks. The Millers made tearful appeals on television, their raw grief laid bare for the city. Flyers with the girls' smiling faces, photocopied hastily, began to appear on lampposts, bus stops, and storefront windows across Milwaukee. Bold letters proclaimed, "Missing, help US find Sarah and Emily Miller. Hope, help, pray." The community rallied at first with an outpouring of support. Volunteer search parties were organized, scouring parks, abandoned buildings, and wooded areas near the Menomonee River. But as days bled into weeks and weeks into months, the initial fervor began to wane. The posters faded, their corners paling, their messages of hope becoming desperate. Detectives Keller and Rodriguez followed every tip, no matter how tenuous. A supposed sighting in a distant suburb, a claim of someone seeing them hitchhiking on a Minus 94. Each lead led only to a dead end. The girls' bank accounts remained untouched. Their social security numbers showed no activity. It was as if Sarah and Emily Miller had simply evaporated into the humid Wisconsin air. The silence from the girls became a deafening roar in the Miller household. Robert became increasingly withdrawn, his once jovial demeanor replaced by a haunted emptiness. He spent his evenings staring blankly at the television, the life slowly draining from his eyes, his hands often trembling. Susan, ever the pragmatist, tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, but the dark circles under her eyes, the persistent tremor in her hands, betrayed her profound suffering. Their marriage began to fray under the relentless, crushing pressure of their shared grief. Every holiday, every birthday was a fresh wound. Sarah would have turned 18, then 19. Emily, sweet 16. Milestones marked only by an unbearable emptiness. The police investigation, starved of new information, slowed to a crawl, then stalled entirely. Without new evidence, without a body, without a suspect, it became another cold case, a thick file tucked away, occasionally pulled out by a new detective or a reporter. The detectives, though frustrated, had other urgent cases. The Millers felt abandoned, their daughter's memory slowly receding from the public consciousness, even as it consumed their every waking moment. Years passed: 1992, 1993, 1994, 1995, 1996, 1997, 1998, 1999. The world moved on, technology advanced. Dial-up internet was a niche phenomenon. Cell phones were still large, expensive bricks. The Gulf War was over, grunge music had peaked, and a new millennium loomed. But for Robert and Susan Miller, time had stopped definitively on April 23, 1991. Their house, once vibrant with teenage energy, was now a silent mausoleum of memories. Sarah's untouched bedroom, Emily's half-finished sketches, they remained exactly as they were, sacred monuments to lives abruptly interrupted. Then came the year 2000, 9 agonizing years after Sarah and Emily Miller vanished. It was a chilly, overcast October morning. A crew from the city of Milwaukee Public Works Department was clearing brush and debris from an overgrown, rarely used stretch of land near the Kinnickinnic River, just south of the Mitchell Park Conservatory. This particular area, a forgotten pocket of urban wilderness, was isolated, a tangled expanse of wild growth and discarded refuse. As a bulldozer rumbled forward, its powerful blade pushing aside decades of tangled vines, fallen branches, and detritus, one of the workers, Frank Lombardi, spotted something unusual. A small flash of silver, a glint of color incongruous with the mud and decay. He stopped the machinery and climbed down, his boots sinking slightly into the soft, damp earth. A chill, unrelated to the autumn air, began to creep up his spine. What he found, partially buried beneath a mound of decomposing leaves and wet soil, exposed by the bulldozer's blade, sent a jolt of icy dread through him. It was a small, ornate silver locket, tarnished and dull with age, its delicate engravings obscured by grime but unmistakable. He picked it up carefully, his breath catching in his throat. Etched faintly on its surface were the initials S. M. Frank immediately called his supervisor, who in turn contacted the Milwaukee Police Department. The scene was quickly secured. Detective Maria Rodriguez, now a seasoned veteran, was among the first officers on site. The name Miller immediately registered. It was one of those cases that stuck with you, delivering only haunting silence. The locket was carefully collected, documented, and sent to the forensic lab. It was undeniably old, consistent with being buried for years. The SM initials were significant but not yet conclusive. Sarah Miller, it was a common enough name. But the location, isolated, forgotten, yet within city limits, was chilling, hinting at a deliberate act. The next day, under the watchful eyes of the media, a more thorough, systematic excavation began. Forensic anthropologists joined the police. The ground was cold, unforgiving, and muddy, but the hope, however faint, was palpable. Hours turned into days. The media circus, with its intrusive cameras, descended upon the Miller family once again, reawakening old scars. And then on the third day of the painstaking excavation, under the supervision of Dr. Alina Vance, they found it. Not bodies, not yet, but something almost as harrowing. Buried just a few feet from where the locket was discovered, wrapped in remnants of a severely degraded, mildewed canvas bag, were 2 small, worn journals. Their pages were warped, brittle, and heavily stained by years of moisture and earth, but the distinct, familiar handwriting was still faintly visible beneath the grime. One journal, bound in a faded blue cover, was immediately recognized as Emily's. Inside, among her intricate drawings, were diary entries. Her last dated entry was April 22, 1991, the day before she vanished. Her words spoke of excitement for summer break, a slight annoyance with Sarah for being so bossy sometimes, and a plan to meet Jessica for their history project. Mundane, ordinary entries, filled with the simple concerns of a 15-year-old girl. No hint of trouble, no premonition. The second journal, a more modest, spiral-bound notebook, was undeniably Sarah's. It contained notes from school, snippets of song lyrics, and short diary entries. Her last dated entry was also April 22nd. She wrote about her shift at the diner, a small spat with Mark, and her hopes for college. However, deeper within the notebook, tucked between 2 pages, was a folded piece of paper. It was a crudely drawn, hand-sketched map, illustrating a shortcut from her diner workplace through a less trafficked alley to a specific bus stop that would get her home faster, especially late at night. There were also a few names scribbled on the same page, some crossed out, next to potential meeting spots, friends from the diner she occasionally socialized with. The discovery of the journals was a seismic shock, an earthquake of emotions. They were irrefutably theirs. The Miller family confirmed the handwriting, the specific, intimate details. Susan Miller, tears streaming down her face, also confirmed the locket. It had been a cherished gift to Sarah from her grandmother. The thing that appeared, and it brought with it not comfort but a renewed, agonizing wave of hope intertwined with chilling despair. For 9 years, the Millers had lived with the torment of not knowing. Now they knew something. And that something was terrifying. The Milwaukee Police Department reopened the Miller sisters' case with renewed intensity. Lieutenant Rodriguez, now leading the investigation, believed the precise location of the journals and locket was crucial. This wasn't a random dumping ground. It was hidden, certainly, but not meticulously so, as if thrown there in haste, or by someone who knew the area well enough to believe it wouldn't be disturbed for a very long time. Forensic analysis of the items, though challenging, proceeded with utmost care. The journals were too degraded for viable fingerprint analysis. The canvas bag remnants provided little beyond common fabric fibers. Yet the contents, especially Sarah's scribbled map and the names, offered an invaluable new avenue. The police immediately revisited Sarah's route home from the diner, meticulously examining the specific alley she might have taken. They re-interviewed everyone associated with the daily grind at the time, particularly the names on Sarah's list of friends. One name, a former cook at the diner named Dennis Kowalski, stood out. He had worked with Sarah but had left Milwaukee suddenly a few months after the disappearance, claiming a vague family emergency in rural Michigan. He was known to have a volatile temper and had a minor criminal record for petty theft, but nothing suggesting violent tendencies. He had been briefly interviewed back in 1991, but had provided a seemingly solid alibi. He claimed he was at home, alone. With this powerful new lead, Lieutenant Rodriguez issued a warrant for Kowalski's arrest. It took several weeks, but he was eventually located in a small town in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, working a menial job at a lumber mill. He was brought back to Milwaukee for questioning, his face pale and drawn. Under intense, methodical interrogation by Lieutenant Rodriguez and her team, Kowalski initially stuck stubbornly to his rehearsed story. But when presented with Sarah's journal, the specific mention of meeting friends from the diner, and the chilling proximity of the discovery site to areas he would have known intimately, his composure began to crack. He admitted to seeing Sarah that night. He had been loitering near the diner, an unhealthy obsession with her growing within him. When she left her shift, she noticed him. They exchanged a few strained words. He tried to convince her to come with him for a quick drink with some friends, an invitation she politely declined. He claimed he then saw her walk towards the bus stop, alone. But the police had already meticulously re-examined the initial 1991 reports. A reclusive elderly woman living near the diner, Mrs. Albright, had mentioned hearing a car screech away from the alley that night, accompanied by a muffled scream, though she hadn't seen anything clearly. The report had been dismissed as unreliable at the time. Now it resonated with terrifying clarity. Lieutenant Rodriguez pressed Kowalski relentlessly. She pointed out the undeniable timeline. Emily was last seen at 5:30 p.m. Sarah left the diner at 7 p.m. How could both disappear and their personal belongings end up together at the same hidden location? The SM locket had been Sarah's, Emily's journal. Kowalski, defeated and sweating, eventually broke down completely. He confessed, but only partially, attempting to mitigate his culpability. He admitted he didn't just see Sarah, he followed her. He ambushed her in the alley, grabbing her from behind. There was a desperate, violent struggle. He forced her into his beat-up, dark blue Ford Escort. He claimed he intended only to talk to her, to make her understand. But then, a detail emerged that chillingly connected the fates of the two sisters. As he was struggling with Sarah, attempting to bundle her into his car, Emily, who had apparently decided to walk a different, slightly longer route home that evening to avoid a certain street, stumbled upon the horrific scene. She had seen her older sister struggling, being forced into a car by a man she recognized. Emily, terrified but brave, had screamed. Kowalski, now in a full-blown panic, grabbed Emily too. He didn't plan it. It was an impulsive act of desperate expediency to silence her, to prevent her from identifying him. He drove them, both bound and gagged, to the isolated area near the Kinnickinnic River, a desolate spot he knew intimately from his youth, a place where people often went to drink and dump trash, confident it would remain undisturbed. His confession, however, ended there. He maintained adamantly that both girls were alive when he left them tied up in a derelict, crumbling shed near the riverbank. He panicked, he insisted. He ran. He claimed he never went back. He didn't know what happened to them after that. He had merely thrown their personal items, the locket and journals, into the thick brush, hoping to obscure their connection to the area to further muddy the waters. The search immediately shifted, with renewed urgency, to the specific area Kowalski described. The derelict shed he spoke of was long gone, demolished years ago during a city revitalization project. But the ground beneath it, the surrounding soil, had never been fully excavated for human remains. The hope for the Millers, agonizing and raw, was renewed, even as dread clung to their hearts. For weeks, the area was meticulously searched. Ground-penetrating radar was deployed. Cadaver dogs sniffed every inch of disturbed earth. The Miller family watched, their faces etched with a desperate mixture of terror and longing for answers for anything. Finally, after another 2 weeks of relentless digging, a grim, grisly discovery was made. Not complete skeletal remains, but fragments, a bone chip, a small tooth. And then a small piece of faded fabric, a remnant of what could have been a school uniform. Each piece was handled with reverence, a tiny fragment of a lost life. Forensic analysis confirmed with heartbreaking certainty that the bone fragments and tooth belonged to two different individuals. DNA extracted from them, however degraded, provided an irrefutable match. Sarah Miller, Emily Miller. The identification was made, bringing a final, devastating certainty to the Miller family's suffering. The relief for Robert and Susan was minimal, almost non-existent. The news confirmed their worst fears, but also provided a grim, horrific clarity. Their daughters had been murdered. The derelict shed where Kowalski had left them, apparently still alive, must have been their final, terrifying prison. He hadn't killed them directly, he claimed, but his actions had undeniably sealed their fate. It was surmised that they either died from exposure, or were further assaulted and killed by someone else who found them, or tragically died due to a collapse of the derelict structure itself, or simply starved. The exact cause of death, due to the fragmented nature of the remains, remained elusive, another cruel uncertainty. Dennis Kowalski was charged with 2 counts of felony murder and 2 counts of kidnapping. His trial, nearly a decade after the crime, was a media sensation in Milwaukee. He maintained his story of leaving them alive, insisting he was only responsible for the kidnapping, not the direct act of murder. The prosecution, however, argued convincingly that his actions constituted felony murder, as the deaths occurred during the commission of another violent felony, kidnapping. The jury deliberated for days. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling. The journals, the locket, Kowalski's damning confession, the precise location of the remains. He was ultimately convicted on both counts of felony murder and kidnapping. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms in prison, without the possibility of parole. The Miller family finally had some form of justice, but true closure remained elusive. The exact chilling circumstances of their daughters' deaths were still shrouded in the haunting uncertainty of those final, terrifying moments. Who found them? What truly happened in that derelict shed in the days or hours after Kowalski abandoned them? Was there another perpetrator? The questions lingered, poisoning the closure they had been promised. The discovery of the journals and locket, 9 years after they disappeared, had been the key, the unexpected trigger that unlocked a decade of silence. This had appeared, bringing with it not comfort, but a confirmation of the deepest, most agonizing fears, turning a painful, prolonged mystery into a devastating, inescapable truth. Today, the site near the Kidnapping River where Sarah and Emily's fragments were ultimately recovered is marked by a small, unassuming memorial. 2 simple stone benches, weathered by the Wisconsin seasons, face the quiet flow of the river, with a modest plaque bearing their names and the dates of their 2 short lives. It stands as a stark, poignant reminder of 2 young lives, once brimming with dreams and potential, tragically extinguished in the hidden, forgotten corners of a bustling American city. The story of Sarah and Emily Miller remains a chilling testament to the fragility of life, the resilience of hope against overwhelming odds, and the agonizing, often incomplete, journey toward truth that families of missing persons are forced to endure. And the question forever haunts the quiet neighborhoods of Milwaukee: what else lies buried beneath the soil, waiting for the relentless passage of time to finally reveal its long-held secrets?